check for Social Security cards. I pay out of my pocket to do background checks. My business runs above board. Others in my trade, they don't care. They don't give a damn. They'll put a pregnant Mexican mom out if they could. This country is spiraling down, and under Reagan and others, manufacturing, the destruction of unions, this country is catching hell. Many of us grew up under union households.
Chicago, what kind of business are you in? Chicago, what kind of...
I'm in construction. And construction is one of the toughest businesses to maintain above board, hiring legal citizens.
Alan Tonelson of the U.S. Business Industry Council. Go ahead.
First of all, I'd have to say that that's the kind of company that should join my organization, because we're also very active trying to bring our out-of-control immigration system under some kind of rational order. And this caller is absolutely right. Companies that try to play by the rules are totally disadvantaged. But I do have to say that Chris's group, the National Association of Manufacturers, has been complaining about regulatory costs and tax costs and pension costs for a long, long time now. But our last caller really put his finger right on it. What they're really complaining about is the fact that the United States has become a first world country. That since the 1930s, we've decided to follow a certain formula that's brought us first world living standards and first world social protections and first world environmental protections, not third world levels. This is an achievement we should be proud of, and the notion that the only way that we can become competitive is to move closer to Chinese levels is something that's absolutely shocking and completely unacceptable politically.
Naperville, Illinois, on our line for independence. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I've got a question. I think Mr. Tonelson will be in a better position to respond to it. But Alan Greenspan, for a long time, always said that our monetary policy was to fight inflation, except when he lowered the rates, housing prices shot up, which to me looks like inflation. And I'd like to know if you think this is another symptom of catering to these large companies. For example, when they did ship our jobs overseas as opposed to opening the Chinese market. And how do you think this will play out in the future? Because the money that was tied up in real estate, which could be drawn out to support our economy, is pretty much tapped out now.
My main worry about former Fed Chairman Greenspan's policies, which have continued right through to his successor, Mr. Bernanke, has to do with exactly what you just said. Since 9/11, they essentially oversaw the pouring of hundreds of billions of dollars of stimulus, government stimulus, into the American economy in the form primarily of very low interest rates, which, as you very rightly pointed out, created a housing bubble and, in fact, inflated many asset bubbles. And this inflation is not counted in the U.S. government's inflation measures. It really should be. But even more fundamentally, it has helped to further addict our economy to growing by debt rather than growing through its own earnings. And the higher and higher our trade deficits grow, the higher and higher our accumulated national debts rise, the more debt-hooked our economy becomes, and the more danger we put future generations into, because eventually those debts have to get paid off.
Christopher Wink of the National Association of Manufacturers, your response?
Oh, I'd just like to quickly point out that I hear a lot about offshoring and sending jobs overseas, and I think it's very important to note that if you look at American manufacturing investment in 2005, U.S. manufacturers invested about $170 billion in factories and equipment in the United States in 2005, while their foreign direct investment outflows to the rest of the world were only $39 billion. So that what it comes down to is that over 80% of U.S. manufacturing investment is in the United States. So, I mean, I understand people are concerned about jobs being shipped overseas, but the reality is that in terms of American manufacturing, most of the investment is happening here in the United States, over 80% of it.
And yet, if you ask yourself, what are they actually buying with those investment dollars? Increasingly, they're buying foreign-made capital goods. Plus, this investment at home has been artificially inflated by the fact that the Fed's very loose money policy for such a long time, even well after an economic recovery began, has made borrowing costs very cheap. But these are artificially low levels, and what we're worried about is when this tide of cheap money recedes, the very grave structural weaknesses of the U.S. economy and the U.S. manufacturing base, which has also been kept at an artificially high level, will become exposed.
We're talking about free trade agreements. Back to the phones in Derry, New Hampshire on our line for Republicans. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Hey, how are you? Look, I was raised as in the Cold War zone where we just didn't do business with communists. And the idea that we are actually propping up a communist regime in China and they take our money and do subversive things around the globe that we totally don't like that cost us even more money is absolutely absurd. Could you explain to just a regular American who grew up, under the guise that we never did business with communists because we had to crush them, how we are propping up a communist regime?
Christopher Wink.
Yeah, well, thank you, caller, for your question. I think that, the concerns that you raise, I can understand where you're coming from. The most important thing is that China is a member of the world community, i.e. China is a member of the World Trade Organization. And my association I work for, we were very supportive of bringing China into the World Trade Organization because within the WTO, they have agreed to abide by commitments under the WTO. And if we're going to hold China to task for any of these laws that they are possibly breaking or concerns that we have, the best way to do it is within a framework like the WTO. So, if they were outside the WTO, we would have no leverage over China. Since they are in the WTO, we do have leverage over them.
But here's the big problem. China has also been identified by the U.S. Defense Department as the biggest potential threat to U.S. national security interests, not only in East Asia, but worldwide. And this comes straight from a Defense Department white paper. The U.S. multinational manufacturing sector has not only spearheaded and aggressively pushed for policies that have poured tens of billions of dollars of investment into China, it's also pushed for technology transfers that have given China America's very best militarily relevant technologies. And in fact, we all read a few weeks ago how the Chinese successfully tested an anti-satellite weapon. Much of that technology came from the American aerospace industry. That's a very dangerous policy. Not to say that China is the next Nazi Germany or even the next Soviet Union, but even the American Defense Department, the Bush administration Defense Department, worries that China's future is very uncertain, and our current trade policies toward China, which have been pouring hundreds of billions of dollars of capital and technology into this economy that's clearly not our friend, is a very reckless policy, and it's got to be reversed very quickly.
According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. exports to China in 2006 were greater than U.S. exports to India, Brazil, and France combined. Back to the phones, Garrettsville, Ohio, on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Hi. One of the questions, I'm up in years, so I lived through World War II. One of the biggest things that nobody ever talks about, would we be able to tool up in 6 months to defend ourselves the way FDR could do, with all these manufacturing places gone, and we don't even manufacture steel? How could we do what we did in World War II? That bothers me a lot. I'll listen to you.
Mr. Wink?
Yes, well, I mean, I still believe that, there still is a very vibrant steel industry in the United States. You just mentioned the steel industry. They the steel industry is a member of the NAM, and I still believe that manufacturing is still very healthy and strong in the United States. Productivity is very high, and I do believe that we still are, the most sought-after manufacturing industry in the world is right here in the United States of America, ma'am.
And Sterling, let's go to the phone. Sterling, Virginia, on our line for Republicans. Good morning.
Thank you. I'm curious. We never hear about the ramifications of the environmental effects that we have on moving our manufacturing overseas. And this is a grave concern because of the problems we have in the world with pollution. And it's not really saving us money if they're polluting over there because that's the whole